penicillin, the first antibiotic was invented. But however, the most basic thing that we require to keep certain infections at bay, like washing our hands properly, we learned only when the pandemic struck in 2020. So that is how the human nature, that till things go a little out of control, we do not pay attention to what needs to be done. And the same is the case with stress management also, that we tend to look at managing the stress part only when it gets a little out of our hands, right? So maybe we should probably take the example from the pandemic and see what are the preventive measures that we all can take in our respective lives, and see that the stress should not build up to a level where we find it's not easier for us to manage it. After the simile, this is what I intend to accomplish through my presentation today, through this small workshop today, that certain things we all are familiar with what stress is, but I will be giving you a more psychological perspective about what stress is, what its various causes could be, and how it reflects in people, what are the various consequences on the mind and body, and a small test to identify our own stress levels, and then quick 3 approaches which you could try to begin from today itself to handle stress in terms of prevention also, or in terms of when it is an existing stress, how can it be managed? So this is what I intend to accomplish through the session today. So starting with what is stress. Now, Hans Selye is considered to be the father of stress psychology. He was the first one to discuss the concept of stress while he was studying about pressure in his research as a physicist. And he gave a very interesting quote that stress is the spice of life and absence of stress is death. So often on different platforms, when I'm talking to different set of people, I try to tell each one of them through their respective expectations and careers, choices, and everything else, that when we do not have stress, we all would have seen that our efficiency, our productivity takes a dip, right? So small amount of stress is important. Similar to an example, if I would give you, that if there is too much of salt in food, it is unpalatable, right? But if there's no salt in food, it is also unpalatable, right? So stress is like a bit of salt and spice, which makes food interesting, which makes food palatable, which makes food attractive to us. We are kind of intending to indulge in that kind of food. However, excess of anything is bad, and similarly, absence of it is bad. So stress in itself is not bad, but excess of it or small stressors over a continued period of time could have an impact on us. So we will try and understand what are the various kinds of stresses. Basically, through the presentation, the concept of stress that we're going to take forward with us is, what we mean by stress here is anything which threatens our well-being. And very important thing to remember is that this threat could come from a real source, or it could be in your mind. So any kind of threat, whether real or imagined, which we have in our heads, can lead to a series of things, and it will only become stressful when we feel we are not able to cope with it. So what we think and what we think in terms of our abilities to deal with it will determine whether we feel stress or not. So general stress, the one that we all know of or usually talk in our day-to-day lives, is like something we have, some office crisis, some workload issues, non-cooperative colleagues, difficult bosses, family conflicts, something which we all of us experience on a day-to-day basis. And most of these, the characteristic of this stress is that it resolves within a short span of time. You don't require any kind of intervention. It's like part and parcel of life. And as the time goes, it's taken care of itself. It does not require an intervention on our parts. Then the next type of stress is what we call as cumulative stress. Now, the same stress that we've spoken about under general stress, it could, if it is not dealt with, if it continues to build up, then it can create the stress which troubles us. Then it becomes difficult to deal with the symptoms which comes with stress. It could also give you physical and mental concerns which are difficult to deal with. So cumulative stress is what additive stress means. When small little stresses tend to add up, they can become a big stressor. They could have the similar kind of impact on you as a catastrophe would have. The third type of stress is, or this kind of stress is something we can think during the pandemic also, like working from home. If you have children who have schools are closed, so handling them. If you have any geriatric, people to take care of, their health concerns, constant fear of, protecting ourselves from the virus. All of these things, small little things, but when they come together, they could be a huge source of stress. The third one is your chronic stress. Now, or traumatic stress. So chronic stress or traumatic stress is when something major happens. This is something which does not happen on a daily basis. It is once in a lifetime or once in a blue moon thing, which does not happen too often, but the impact of it can be lasting. So it could be any incident which could shake the foundations of your normal day-to-day living. So it could be an accident, it could be a kind of physical injury, it could be a bankruptcy, it could be disruption of a relationship, it could be death of somebody, and so on and so forth. So these events, because they don't happen that frequently, but can have a lasting impact, can leave considerable stress residue, which needs to be sometimes taken care of on a priority basis. And though it can take a toll on us, it is considered to be a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. So almost all of us would have a severe reaction or would have a very strong reaction to a death, a failure of a relationship, or any kind of professional failures or loss of a job, which again, pandemic has given us so many such reasons which could create to stress. And that's the reason during this time, managing the stress is something which is my congratulations to the team which thought of considering keeping a session on stress management while talking about technical sessions or while talking about a subject which does not require intervention in terms of anything related to psychology. But the fact is, stress management is something that we all need to be aware of, and it is not something we can wish away, or it is not something which comes with a subject domain. And the last one, which again happens in cases of extreme situations, similar to critical incident stress, is which leads a trauma, right? So, of course, death of any kind can be disruptive, can be demoralizing, can lead to a lot of emotions. However, when someone who has lived a very wholesome life, they have lived many decades of their life together and have fulfilled all their respective roles, when they pass away, their death may not cause as much trauma than that of somebody whom we probably lost during the pandemic in most unfortunate circumstances. Somebody we lost to a natural catastrophe, somebody of kind of bankruptcy which happened at the beginning of your career, or a complete loss of finances, a dacoity or a theft which has left you penniless. Any of these things and any kind of abuse somebody has been through can lead to a traumatic condition post it happens. And the fact is, like, unlike critical incident, this trauma is something which people tend to not able to get past, right? And that could be a cause of huge distress to people. It is also called as, when it becomes too difficult to handle and manage by an individual, it is termed as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And it could be happening because of extreme psychological trauma, where your foundations of your sense of being are shaken. Then it is considered to be, I would request everyone if they could mute themselves. And this is when all these major incidences that we spoke about in acute stressors are not dealt with properly. Like you do not have a support system, you do not have any kind of insurance, you do not have any family to take care of you during the time of crisis, then it requires intervention. And unlike acute stress, this one could lead to lasting changes in the way a person is. It does not, fortunately, does not happen to most of us. But when it happens, it could really, really slow us down. It could really stop us in our tracks. It could put a pause to our life. This has been something that we are studying, that especially after the second wave, which hit the country during the pandemic, many people lost so many family members or somebody known to them, and in the most unfortunate circumstances, right? So this was not something which was anticipated, or this was not something they saw it coming. So the experiences have left a whole lot of people very traumatized, and we are fearing that there could be a huge residue of that stress be seen in people, seen in survivors, seen in relatives, and that kind of stress would come under the category of PTSD. Now, this is specifically with regards to working population like you and I. The kind of occupational stress which comes from workplace is largely studied in the realms of what is called as burnout. Burnout is where you are not able to overcome the consequences of the situations or consequences of the circumstances which you are currently facing. As a result, it leads you to a state of without intervention of no return, right? So how would we define a burnout? It's a mix of physical and psychological symptoms that result in decreased job satisfaction as well as decreased productivity. So when we start, the opposite of burnout is rust out. Like what Celia said, absence of stress is death. So rust out is when you're not doing what you're supposed to do. So Hindi mein kehte hain na, jang lag gaya, right? So you rust out. You're not being challenged enough. You're not being motivated enough. You're not stimulated enough. And as a result, you're not able to deliver your best. In that case, it is a rust out. And on the other hand, when we speak about burnout, it is you're constantly in a hyper challenging environment with no respite. And as a result, it could lead to a state of burnout. And in a study which was conducted by Gallups in 2020, he found that the participants, when they were asked about whether they experienced burnout, 48% of them said sometimes, and 21% said always. Feeling stressed and tired is not an unusual thing. Many of us who are working from home or handling multiple responsibilities may feel under the weather at times or feel overwhelmed because of the number of responsibilities. But when we are not able to overcome that sense of exhaustion or overcome a sense of not being able to come out of that, that means we are experiencing burnout, and that's something we need to be careful about. And as a result, people who are the survey found that the people who reported experiencing burnout, 63% of them were likely to call it a sick day. They would be absent from work, and 23% of them could suffer because of their burnout symptoms so much that they may require immediate physical medicinal intervention. That's the impact stress could have on us when it is gone unattended to or unmanaged. What are the various causes of burnout? According to World Health Organization, this unmanageable occupational stress is primary cause of burnout. And besides that, the other factors which could lead to burnout at work, and I think many of us can relate with it here, though this, I feel maybe in academics, we do not have that kind of pressure, but probably people from our families are working in those corporate cultures where these could be more visible. But I'm sure we can see glimpses of this in our own respective work environment also at times. Unrealistic work expectations, micromanagement by authorities, poor instructions where you're supposed to deliver, but how you're supposed to deliver and what needs to be covered is not given. Isolation in terms of no interaction or no tacit support from the team could also be a reason. And lack of support and unfair treatment with regards to incentive, with regards to interpersonal relationships, with regards to exchanges with the higher authorities, all these things. And if you look at it, during the pandemic, all of them have kind of multiplied, right? Everybody is kind of groping in the dark, not knowing how to navigate through the crisis. So everybody who has been fortunate enough to be retained with a job are handling these kind of situations on a regular basis. And as a result, a recent report has shown that there has been a huge number of workforce, especially in Europe, who have decided to say goodbye to their corporate lives and settle for a more simpler life where they're able to spend more time with the children, with their families, and be in a more cleaner, be in a more less cutthroat competition, even if it means that they have to cut down on their financial gains as well. And if I'm not mistaken, they said Germany is facing an attrition rate of 23%. So pandemic has kind of created a sense of awakening in people what our natural priorities are. And because we have not been taking care of them, as a result, a lot of our workforce has been burning out. And the worst thing is, if the younger generation, the ones we're talking about who are less than 35, if they start to report burnout at this stage, the future of the country could also look little bleak. And that's why stress management becomes even more imperative. This is, if you have a pen and paper, I am sure you all would be carrying a pad and a pen. Please write down the answers to these questions. I will be revisiting them when we start talking about the management part. For each statement, please give a yes or no, and you could write that for first statement, you said this or that, right? You have skipped a meal, made a poor nutritional choice. Instead of good wholesome food, you ended up eating instant noodles or some kind of other fast food, which is not good for our health. Can I request the host to kindly mute everyone so that we do not have these interruptions? You got irritated.
Ma'am, you just unmute yourself. I muted all. Ma'am, you are muted. You just unmute yourself. No, ma'am,
Actually,
yes.
I was using a cursor because of which it was not allowing me to do it. Right. All right. So, so we have skipped a meal, made a poor nutritional choice, got irritated or overwhelmed easily. We left out a social gathering or have felt alone, lonely, have felt neglected or by a significant other or it could be a colleague, it could be a family member, a friend. We have lost at least an hour of sleep or skipped out any kind of a physical regime that we have been following. So it could be games, it could be your daily walks, it could be a yoga session, and whatever that you do for keeping yourself healthy. So if you have done any of this in the last 2 weeks, please make a note of it. We will revisit it later. What these scores mean or what your responses mean have a meaning, which we will revisit later. So now we move on to what are the various consequences of stress on our physical, emotional, and cognitive health. Now, as we spoke about in the definition of stress, that it is our perceived inability to cope, So how do we decide whether we are unable to cope with the stress? Not every situation is stressful in its nature, right? So any situation can trigger two responses. One, you may see it as relevant and threatening, or you may see it as irrelevant and harmless. If you don't see it as relevant, applicable to you, or causing you any threat, you will experience no stress. However, if you find that it challenges you in a certain way or it threatens your well-being in a certain way, you will do a second appraisal. This is your primary appraisal. You will do a second appraisal in terms of seeing that do you have enough resources to deal with what is being asked of you? If yes, you will experience no stress. However, if you feel you do not have the physical, emotional, psychological, technical capabilities of dealing with what is being challenged or what is being thrown at you, then only you're going to experience stress. So no situation in itself is stressful. It is our respective response and also our own assessment of our coping resources or our abilities, realistic assessment of our abilities, which decides whether we are going to feel stressed or not stressed. So something you have been doing for years together, right? And somebody tells you next day you have to make a presentation in front of DBT, right? If it is something you have a mastery in, it would not consider, it would consider to be a little threatening and relevant to you, but you will realize that you have enough resources to deal with it, and as a result you may not experience as stress. But if the topic has something which you have not researched much about, it is something you have to learn yourself, and the time given to you is only less than 24 hours, you're bound to feel stress. So not every situation would lead to stress. It is our sense of appraisal at the level of whether it is meaningful, and secondly, are we capable enough of dealing with it or not, will decide whether we'll experience stress or whether we will not experience stress. So the management part that we will be looking at will be dealing with how can we create this reservoir of coping resources, so that every time a situation which looks challenging to us, we may find ourselves prepared enough to deal with it. So as a result, our spontaneous response to stress, a stressful situation, would be, yes, I can handle it. So this is something since you all are from biochemistry, if I'm not mistaken, and try to give an example of how stress creates an imbalance in our systems and why handling stress is so important to bring back the emotional physical balance back. So the central nervous system, as you know, that it has a sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic nervous system is responsible for the transmission of these, and it is something which takes care of our fight and flight responses. So whenever there is a stressful situation, again, real or imagined, your body gets into a response of fight or flight. And that adrenaline rush that we talk about, which kicks us into action, into motion, and makes us perform the activity needed for survival, which is kind of hardwired into our genetic makeup. The same, despite the fact that we're not living in jungle, our responses remain the same. And these two, when they're at an elevated rate, it could lead to exhaustion because you're constantly in a high alert mode. And as a result, your body would start to show more symptoms of wear and tear. And this particular hormone, cortisol specifically, is responsible for activating our fight or flight response. And in order to deal with whatever our stressor is, we all may experience an increased heart rate, a spike in our blood glucose. Blood flows more to the limbs, so that in order to help us flee from the situation, the physical response of removing ourselves from the situation, and it will reduce supply to the other organs and digestive system, because it is working in the direction of helping you survive whatever you consider as a threat. So the jungle has moved to an urban jungle, but our physical response to a stressful situations remains the same. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system releases the hormones serotonin, dopamine, growth hormones, and melatonin, which is responsible for your rest and repair mode. So it is responsible for healing, digestion, detoxification, and growth of the body. So when we are under constant stress, what we are dominated by is cortisol, and the production of melatonin is reduced. And as a result, we see a lot of damage to our physical body and our emotional and cognitive responses. And the damage that we see are in terms of these things. Our immunity goes down, our digestion is affected, our sleep patterns have gone for a toss, and so on and so forth. So high levels of stress, in a way, innately creates trouble in our bodies, right? And when we are able to find ways to put ourselves to a state of relaxation, a state of calm, a state of mindfulness, we are allowing our body to get into a rest and repair mode. So which mode is on if we are constantly stressed? Fight or flight. Which mode is on when we are not stressed, when we are calmer, we are relaxed, when we are more in charge of situation? Rest and repair. So constantly being stressed can play a havoc in your body, something which we may not be aware of on a symptomatic basis, because we don't know what's happening inside the body. But over a period of time, as we spoke about chronic stress or PTSD or burnout, your body tends to start to take a toll on your body. So imagine if you are under a sustained period of stress, what would happen to your body? This part is completely ignored and body is in a survival mode. So cortisol is, as we said, it is the hormone which takes care of our fight and flight response. It's an aging hormone. And when we have elevated levels of cortisol and for a longer period of time, it can lead to depression and also feelings of exhaustion. In the long run, it can also lead to wear and tear of the body, which is also called as allostatic load. So that's why people who are prone to stress or are easily stressed out or are under constant stress, they would be talking about symptoms which would be seen in the next slide, and all these aspects of our functioning are affected, right? So what happens if your body is in a constant alarm stage, right? You would not get a chance to recuperate, you would not get a chance to slow down, and as a result there would be a burnout that we may experience. The symptoms that we commonly see with regards to our physiological symptoms are headaches, heartburn, rapid breathing, palpitations, chances of heart attack, any kind of coronary risks are increased. Fertility problems, if data if we go by the data, the fertility issues at a much younger age are rampant than it was in the previous generation. Reproductive concerns have raised, mood disorders are on a rise. People as young as 15, 16 are speaking about sleep disturbances or insomnia, and very importantly, weakened immune system. Given the times, our immunity is our insurance against any kind of infectious disease. So sustained period of stress also weakens our immune system, and that's something that is one of the reasons that we need to be in know of how to manage our stress. It can lead to type 2 diabetes, it could lead to higher blood pressure, it could lead to stomach issues, and it could also lead to different kind of musculoskeletal issues as well. If we divide the symptoms in 4 categories, these are the symptoms that your digestion is affected, your immunity goes down, there could be different types of headaches, your sleep patterns are disrupted, you could have different kinds of aches and pains. Very importantly, immunity lowers down, and there's a constant sense of fatigue, tiredness. On an emotional level, you may be seeing yourself to be reacting far more easily, so you could be more impatient and irritable. You could be feeling low or sad without any possible explanation. Everything, small triggers could easily overwhelm you. You may not be able to rest well. You may always be in a state of what do we say? There's an unrest that, you were not able to sit still and be at peace. You could always be in a state of unrest. Things which you were enjoying earlier do not bring the same kind of joy to you. There could be a sense of isolation, a more negative outlook towards future. You may feel yourself to be more isolated, lonely, and helpless. In terms of how it may be seen in your behavior, there could be change in eating patterns. It is often seen that people who are undergoing episodes of stress, either they tend to eat a lot or their appetite goes for a toss, right? So you may see weight gain and weight loss as a result of it. More leaves and more absentia from work. So if it's school-going children or college-going students, they may be missing school and college. Likewise, working professionals may start reporting lesser to workplace as a result of it. They may start to isolate friends and family, not seeking company, not enjoying the company of other people. And the interpersonal relationship between friends and family is also, and of course colleagues, also takes a hit. In terms of your mental capabilities, people who are under stress have reported to be not able to concentrate well. As a result, they could be prone to a lot of accidents also. They have often reported bouts of forgetfulness, which could last from episodes to a longer period of time. Excessive worrying, छोटी-छोटी बात पे बहुत ज़्यादा चिंता होना. Anxious, constantly worrying about what may happen tomorrow, and the worry is always about the negative may happen tomorrow. Compulsive rumination, एक ही बात सुई की तरह दिमाग में बार-बार चलते जाना कि why did it happen, or why me? Those kind of things. You're not able to get past a particular thought which is worrisome. As a result, it could reduce your productivity in your respective field of work. And of course, there is a sense of pessimism as well. Now, these are some questions which we're going to score to understand your perceived level of stress. So I would want all of you to kindly choose a response from these options for each of these items. Like, for example, item number 1, and this is with regards to how have you felt in last 1 month only, right? So have you felt confident about your ability to handle your personal problems? If you say never, so you write N, almost never, sometimes, fairly often, very often. Choose any one of these responses. This will give you an insight to what you think is your perceived level of stress in the present times. So I would request each one of you to please go through each statement and score yourself accordingly so that we can assess our stress levels right now. Sorry. One of you could please tell me if it has been done by everyone. Dr. Smita, if it happens sometimes, you can choose sometimes as your option. Okay, done. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ma'am, because I have done PhD in biological science and I am not getting any job or I am not doing anything right now. So sometimes I felt it's very stressful because I am not achieving what I felt in my academic life. So this is all I felt in the last 1.5, 2 years. Stress because of this.
Right. So you're saying that you may not have experienced it in 1 month, but you've experienced in last 2 years.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So, but have you experienced the same thing in last 1 month as well?
Ma'am.
I'm sorry?
Yes, ma'am. Since last 1 month also, I felt the same thing.
Right. So the idea is for us to see, if you look at each question, it is giving us an insight to how we feel, right? Most of the times our reaction is, we are stressed because of a person, we are stressed because of X situation. We are not talking about how we respond to situations, right? So this is a more insight to, as the title of this tool is, perceived stress. How are you responding? How are you feeling about the situation, right? So once we identify, that's why I have compartmentalized the presentation in a way that first we learn about what stress is, second, how it affects us, third, we learn about how we respond to stressful situation. And then once I've primed you for what is stress, and if you are experiencing stress, unfortunately, then what can be done to manage it, right? So stay with me. Once you've identified how much you score in terms of this particular test and the one which we'll be doing later, we will also help you understand what can be done. And for a specific situation, if you're willing to speak about it, I could probably offer you customized insights to that as well, right?
Okay, ma'am.
So for item number 1 to 4, for every never, give yourself 5, for almost never 4, and so on and so forth. So for first 4 questions, your scoring would look like this. And likewise, for item numbers 5 to 10, actually, sorry, this should be 5 to 10, your scoring would be never, you will score it 1. So the scoring reverses. Once you give each response a number, like for example, if you had, for your first question, you had 3, for your second question, you had 1, for third, you had 4. So 3, 1, 4 plus 2 plus 5, that's your score. And similarly, you will have 6 items for this as well. And you will come to a total score, which would be anywhere between a 1 to 50. So please come up with a total tally. Give me a minute, Dr. Pradarshini. So if everybody has made a note of how to score, I'll just take the slide back for Dr. Pradarshini. Let me repeat the instructions. For each item, you will choose 1 score. So that means for every item, you will have 1. So total 10 scores for each one of them. They could range from never to very often, depending on how you have felt in the last 1 month. Then for item number 1 to 4, you will be scoring every never you have put as 5 and almost never as 4, sometimes as 3, fairly often as 2, and very often as 1. And for item number 5 to 10, for every never it will be 1, almost never 2, sometimes 3, fairly often 4, and 5. So you will have 10 scores in front of each of these statements, and you will have a total score ranging between 1 to 50. So please score each item. You don't, Mr. Dr. Agrawal, you don't have to mention it to me. You just have to note it down for your own understanding of how much stress do you think you're experiencing right now. Does anybody have an idea what would a low score or a high score would mean here? What would a 10 and a 40 would mean here? Dr. Ayan, in psychology, we don't say good or bad, but we only, yeah, thank you, Dr. Chaitali, that yes, 40 would mean that the scores that you're reporting are indicative of a higher stress, right? So if you have scored above 35, anything between 35 to 50, that shows that you're experiencing higher levels of stress. Anything between 20 to 35 is moderate, and 1 to 10 is of course low level, and 10 to 20 is a little more than but manageable stress. So if any one of you or those of you have scored 35 and 50, it is about time that this session has come at the right time, that you must make stress management a priority. Dr. Tatani, I'm also looking at the chat box and responding to observations. Is that all right, or should I be attending to them towards it?
You go ahead,
All
because
right.
it's all about the stress management, and if participants get any benefit with you, then it will be our pleasure.
My absolute intention that at the end of it, I am able to leave you with some key things that you could, implement from here today onwards. So this is the reason I have been emphasizing it through the part of the presentation done till now as well. But this is one of the studies which has been done by Cigna company, which is a pharmaceutical company, and they conduct these well-being survey on the customers from 23 countries, which includes from European countries to America to South countries from UAE and also from Southeast Asia, including India. And these results are something which is a kind of an alarm bell for almost all for across the world, and especially for India, because though marginally we have improved in terms of our stress scores in respect to other countries, but some of the findings that you will have, which is not necessarily related to India, but of the larger population that is studied, is alarming in nature, and it is emphasizing that we probably need to take cognizance of the fact that stress is taking a toll on not just our professional lives, but also our physical, emotional, and work-life balance as well. And we need to address it on a priority basis. So this survey, which was conducted, took into account the physical, financial, workplace, social, and family wellness of its customers. And the results which they found suggested that almost all the respondents from all these 23 countries were affected by stress, and they felt that workplace stress was directly contributing to decline in physical health. And I know in my own family and in my extended social circle that people who are working in private sector are extremely stressed, and their body has taken a hit because of the kind of work pressure which is unrelenting. It is going on for months and years together, and now it has started to show an impact on a lot of people in my age bracket and people around me. And what is interesting, I'm assuming that majority of us who are present are between the age of 35 and 49. What they found specifically was that what we all call it as sandwich generation. Out of all the people who were surveyed, the sandwich generation, which is people ranging between the age of 35 to 49, scored lowest in most dimensions. Right? So in their physical wellness, in their financial wellness, in their workplace, and social and family wellness, these were the people who were scoring the lowest. And the reason they're called sandwich generation is they have children as well as parents to take care of. And as a result, they are responsible for two sets of entities and their workplace stress, and not enough opportunities, resources, and social support for them to handle their own stresses. Stress in general, out of all the people who were studied, 84% of those surveyed said they were stressed. So look at a whopping 84% people saying that they were stressed, and 13% of them admitted that they are not able to manage their stress. So even if 13% sounds like a smaller number in comparison, but if you look at it, 84% do experience stress on a regular basis. When it came to stress at work, 87% of the people who are employed, they said they are stressed, and only 12% felt their stress is unmanageable, but 64% claimed that they're in an always on environment. Matlab, the alert stage, the one which you spoke about where your sympathetic nervous system is on an alert, they are feeling that they're constantly on an alert phase. And we may not realize it, especially when you are younger, but this burning out, which is happening without any kind of break or without any kind of reprieve, can have tremendous and physical and emotional consequences on our younger generation. And pandemic has only made the situation worse. Probably when I finish this, we could open this for discussion and talk about how pandemic has only increased stress for people from working from home. If I could say from my own example, there are no office timings anymore. You could have a mail asking for something to be done at 5 o'clock in the morning till 12 o'clock at night. Now, at any time of the day, you could be, you're accessible at all times. So we may not have as many responsibilities, or we may not have threat to the job per se, but the ones who are out there, if they're also experiencing a similar kind of situation before the pandemic, and if pandemic is only worsened, we are looking at a ticking bomb, if I may say so. Many of us who are working women here, they were the second demographic variable which they found to be way more stressed than in comparison to their counterparts. And they found that 88% of women were stressed compared to 85% of working men. 13% of women claimed that they could not manage the stress in comparison to 11% of men. And if you look at it, it could be coming from the sense of that women also have to take care of their family responsibilities. And if I may say so, on the basis of being a social scientist and on my experiences with the subjects and the populations that I have worked with, sometimes a woman's job is not even considered to be at par with a man's job in the same family. And as a result, the priority which is required, or the attention which is required to be given at workplace, may be compromised, and that could also be a sense of, that could be also a source of stress for women. So not only in terms of their family pressures, but in terms of workplace stress also, women have been found to be more stressed and unable to handle, even if marginally so, in comparison to the men of the same categories. Lastly, very importantly, the time poor mentality. Many of them felt that they do not have enough time to do what they wish to do or what needs to be done. That's the reason time management I have kept as one of the intervention strategies. And 26% of those who feel time poor experience unmanageable, they also reported to be highly stressed. So those who were not able to manage time well also reported a higher levels of stress. So not being able to manage time would also have an impact. It's a kind of a direct correlation on their stress scores as well. So this study, which is recently done just before the pandemic, I have included this to emphasize that why all of us, whether through these FDPs, through school, in the, a part of school curriculum or part of our educational plans, just about everybody needs to be aware of what stress is and needs to learn to manage it on a timely basis, on a regular basis, and should have a few tips, few techniques in their arsenal to deal with stress as and when it strikes. Now, so all this while I have been kind of speaking only about things which makes us probably more stressed. But now I would bring on some good news here. With the first thing, that what we need to remember is that stress mostly is manageable. In extreme cases, also when we're talking about chronic stress or PTSD, it is also manageable. The only difference is you may require someone else's help to manage it, but it is all manageable. So there's nothing which is not, which cannot be resolved, which cannot be handled, which cannot be managed. So the good news is the stress is manageable, and we have resources. If we equip ourselves with those, we can greatly minimize the negative outcomes or the negative consequences of stress as well. I'm a strong proponent of it, and my MPhil work was on lifestyle interventions in stress management. And there's a tremendous amount, amount of research which has been done, which talks about lifestyle principles, whereby the changes do not have to be symptomatic. That, for this particular situation, I learned a way, I dealt with it, then I go back to my usual practices. No, lifestyle principles speak about that we need to bring a shift, a paradigm shift in our respective lives to kind of lead lives which will support us to handle stress better, or deal with stress better, or not experience stress at all if possible, but not just deal it on a stimulus response way. So for this, when we talk about stress management, the self-management is the key. If we learn how to manage ourselves, it will not only bring down stress and our anxiety levels, but would also improve the quality of life. So we need to learn to manage ourselves, not because we have to handle stressful situations, but also because we want to live a more, what we call in psychology as a more flourishing life, more thriving life. So we need to move from surviving to thriving. And that's where self-management plays a huge role, of which stress management is also a key component. So in order to, because, stress management, it's such a vast topic in itself. I did my entire thesis on it. So to sum everything which could be done with regards to managing stress in a 2-hour workshop is seemingly not possible. So what I have done here is taken up those tools and techniques which can be easily learned, which could be directly applicable to the demography that I'm speaking to the teaching fraternity that I'm speaking to. And it has been found to be relevant across different kinds of stresses. It could be work related, it could be interpersonal stress, it could be an emotional stressor, it could be physical stressor. For all of these, this could act both. It would help as a response, effective response to manage it. And also, if you continue to practice it, it would also be your insurance against any kind of future stress. So the 3 approaches to self-management have been clubbed under action-oriented, action, emotion, and acceptance-oriented approaches. So if you remember the question I had asked, question number 12, I had slide number 12, I had asked you that please write down your responses. Let me take you back to that. Yeah. So please remember the responses you have given to this particular item, and I move forward from here, right? And the acronym we are using for understanding this is what we call as HALT stage. HALT. HALT is pause, stop, right? So when we talk about these responses, why these responses are important is because what we are asking you to do is check on your HALT states, right? So if you have answered yes to one of the first 2 statements, right? So you may have responded to the H component, and similarly for each subsequent items, 2 subsequent items, you would be responding to A, L, and T. Now, what is HALT? HALT is something we are asking. In a way, it is an acronym for the terms that we'll be using. And also in terms of HALT is take a pause, right? Before we react, we need to check on these HALT states. So what are HALT states? The first is H. If you have skipped food, or if you have eaten a kind of food which has no nutritional value, it could create a sense of deficiency, and because of which you may be reacting in a different manner, right? There is a very popular advertisement also that which says that when you are angry, you go into an extreme mode, right? In Hindi, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with or comfortable with Hindi, but in Hindi there's a saying that says "Bhuke pet na hoye bhajan gopala." So an empty stomach, you cannot even concentrate on spirituality or concentrate on God as well. So hunger could be one of the reasons why sometimes we tend to react differently to a situation. So before you see yourself as somebody who's stressed or who's acting out, check these halt states. Hunger. So when we are hungry, we are more likely to be distracted and prone to stress. It could change our mood. It could change our response to situation. And as a result, we may find ourselves feeling more stressed out than usual. So if you are hungry, make sure you have something nutritious to eat before you deal with whatever you're considering as stressor for the time being. Anger. Now, if our first response to a situation is anger, right? Some kind of aggression is our response to any situation, you would see that it will only add to your current stress. No situation whatsoever. You could pick up an example, we can dissect it right now and find out how anger resolved the situation. So when you're already dealing with a stressful situation, or when you're already dealing with a situation which is kind of boiling, anger only adds, fuel to fire. And as a result, if you are responding in anger to a stressful situation, it can have a deterring effect on your relationships. It can have a negative impact on your productivity as well. Third is lonely. Now, when we talk about we have felt isolated, we have felt let down, we have felt neglected, it is also coming from a place that if you're already feeling lonely, right? If you're already feeling sad, so what other person does would only add to your misery because you're already in a state which is causing you stress. So when you are lonely, you would see that your outlook to life is in any case very skewed, or is in any case very negative. And in this particular condition, your response to stress would also be extreme. And the last one is tired. Now, tiredness could be emotional, could be physical, but if you are feeling a sense of fatigue, or you're exhausted, you would not be able to make correct decisions, be it while you're driving from someplace and you're tired, your motor ability, your coordination, eye hand coordination can take a toll, go for a toss. And likewise, when you're tired, your ability to concentrate and focus and make more sense of the situation would also be severely affected. So when we talk about we being stressed, first look at, were you experiencing any of these states, and is your response to a situation coming because of this? Then deal with these situations and you will see your stresses automatically come down. Now, this is your preliminary way of screening whether the situation is stressful or my assessment of situation is stressful because of any of these factors. So you halt, you pause, assess, are you experiencing any of this? And is it because of any of these factors that you're responding to a situation in a different way? Then your first thing you need to do is deal with these and then come back and address what is concerning you right now. So that's your first thing. Now we move on to action-oriented approaches. And under this, we'll be looking at the most important thing, which is time management skills, right? We all have 24 hours. Some of us are able to accomplish a lot during the same time, and some of us struggled with, accomplishing even what is to be done, that the minimum needs to be done. Second is goal setting, how to make smart goals. We'll be talking about this in detail. And third is conflict management. Now, these are things which you need to do, act on them. You need to work on these to make sure that it makes your ability to handle stress better. We'll take each one of them. First is, when we're talking about stress management, it is important to identify that what needs to be done first, right? So prioritizing is something that we all probably have learned in theory, but have never tried applying in the practical. So first thing is, what is right now? What is the thing that needs to be attended to foremost? Right? So prioritizing is something that is integral part of time management. So once you do things that need to be dealt now, or you think that will require more effort on your part, then you should do that first, right? Many people, the so-called, the ones we idolize and the ones we consider to be more successful, they all say that they have a to-do lists that they make on a daily basis, right? So having a to-do list is something which helps to tick off everything which you have accomplished in the from the beginning of the day towards as the day progresses, and every completion of task is self-reinforcing. So if, let's say, if you your first target in a make to-do list was to go for walk for half an hour, right? You come back and you say you have done this, it will give you a sense of satisfaction that you set out to do something and you have been able to do that, right? That is one thing. Then schedule slots for what needs to be done. So let's say if you have certain family responsibilities, if certain things are sacrosanct, that they need to be done, they are non-negotiable, you make time for them, that this needs to be done in this period only, and that way it will ensure that you are not mixing the gaps, mixing the time frames, and you sticking to it will ensure that each of those are taken care of. Third point is prioritize, which I've already spoken about. Fourth is complete stage one, get something done. Now, let's not be jack of all, master of none, right? So when we try to multitask, I think humans are not meant to multitask, but somehow in this whole, want of accomplishing too much in too little time, we are only burning ourselves from both the ends. So it is important that you finish one task before you move on to the other, right? Because when you take on too many responsibilities and try to do justice together, it will all be half cooked, right? So start with the biggest thing. Like sometimes we say swallow the frog first thing in the morning. So the biggest and the toughest task could be done the first, or the simplest. If you start with the ascending order, taking the simplest task first, moving on to the last one, whichever way you think you work best, right? It is up to you how you think you're going to perform, or what works for you. You choose that, but then complete each task before you move on to the next. Too many incomplete tasks, unaccomplished goals would also lead to more stress in comparison to if half of them have been complete and half of them are still remaining. Do not procrastinate. As we spoke about in daily stresses, we also said the cumulative stress. So they say hard work is nothing but accumulation of small little tasks which have piled up over a period of time. If we deal with what needs to be done here and now, right, rather than pushing it to the last date or pushing it to the nth moment, if we are able to do it right now, right here, we will realize that we are able to manage our time better. Because and plus I say this from my experience, personal experience, and of what I hear in my therapy sessions as well, that a lot of time what happens is that if you have a particular task to finish, right, and if you do not take it up today, and because the deadline is 10 days hence, for the next 9 days it's on the top of your head that you have to do that, right? But if you are able to finish it even before the deadline becomes looming large, you're able to finish it in the next 2 days, the next 7 days you're not worrying about it, right? So that's one way of simply taking away your a load off you by just doing what in any case needs to be done. Do not multitask. I have mentioned that already. Set and respect deadlines, right? Now, it is something no one is forcing you to do. So you make more realistic deadlines. You give yourself a leeway where, if you feel that you have family responsibilities or social commitments on certain days, or you're not feeling up to it, whatever your concerns could be, you make the deadlines in accordance to your current circumstances or in accordance to what your current schedule allows you to. But it is very important that you respect those deadlines. You miss a couple of deadlines, and if you're able to accomplish the work, it becomes a trend to ho to jayega. This we will be able to do it. But you don't realize the amount of stress you'll be putting yourself to do those things just because you did not stick to the original deadlines. So this is a template which is just to give you an idea about how a to-do list could be made. Whatever needs to be done, whatever ideas comes to your mind, it is very important now, especially those of you who are pursuing research, you may feel that, you may be thinking of an experiment while watching a movie. And at that point of time, you may not go back to your lab, or you may not have access to whatever you require to work on it. And the next day you may forget about it, right? So when you have a to-do list diary or a journal where you jot down these things, these ideas could also be jotted, because not necessarily that the ideas would come to you when you are in a lab, when you are in a class, or when you are in a library, or when you are studying together, right? Whichever way, ideas may not come to you in the most opportune places, right? So it is important for you to have these small little notepads with you, where you are able to come up, whatever idea which helps you deal with the situation better, which helps you to mend a relationship fine, which helps you to handle your finances better, children, colleagues, life partner, or research professional goals. Make a list here on a day-to-day basis. Whatever comes, you list it down. Then you start with what your to-do list is. You can make it a night before, right? Before you go off to sleep, or the first thing in the morning. Though I would suggest night before, because your first thing in the morning would be, done already. To look into the to-do list is already done. And then you list number of things which you want to accomplish in a day. And in the middle of the day, you could see as doing things which have been done. They're corrected here. Things which are in the middle of being processed, doing. And at the end of the day, you could see how many of these have been cut off, and how many of these have been struck right, and how many of these have left. On a day-to-day basis, once you start doing it, you will realize, you will get into a habit of knowing how much time you take for accomplishing things. And as a result, you could tweak and reset your deadlines, and you will have more, you will feel more in charge of the 24 hours which you have been given. And if you're able to manage time well, it has been found to be a great predictor of success in your personal and professional lives. Second is this is something we use in our management classes, that goal setting is one of the theories. That how do you go, what motivates you, or how do you ensure that what you are setting out for, you are able to accomplish, right? So for that, it is important that goals should be SMART, right? And the SMART is an acronym that we use, that the goal has to be specific, right? It could be anything that you wish to do. I need to write a paper in next 15 days, measurable in 15 days, attainable. When you are writing a paper, depending on the kind of research, I'm assuming some of you are doing research, or it could be any of your academic pursuits that you are undertaken. So attainable. So let's say if you're doing a kind of work which may not allow you to publish in Nature, right? So do not say that I'm going to publish a paper in Nature in next 6 months. Your research may or may not produce that kind of results which would allow you to be published in Nature. So keep those goals which you think are attainable. I'm not saying that you don't aim for bigger things, but you should be more realistic in your assessment of, is it doable right now? You may be able to do it after publishing 10 papers. You know the kind of quality and the kind of hard work, or the kind of in-depth research which needs to be done to publish a paper in Nature. So you would know it by then, right? So attainable is very important. If you set out too high a goal and you're not able to attain it, you will feel more disheartened. So please set more realistic goals. Results oriented. It should, at the end of it, you should know that your efforts have brought you an outcome, or have they failed. So either way, there should be a sense of assessment that whether it worked or did not work. And why is it important is because you will be able to see that how my next set of goals should be done, because the previous ones did not work on these parameters. And that's why the goals have to be result oriented, and very importantly, time bound. You cannot have an indefinite period of time given for thing. I'll do it when? I'll do it someday. I'll do it one day. I'll do it soon. I'll do it in near future. These are all things we are kind of bargaining with ourselves for time, right? So when you say, I'll finish this chapter, which I'm writing for a book, or I'm going to finish this presentation, or I'm going to finish this preparation for this talk in next 2 days. 2 days is what you need to do. and you will have to ensure then you work towards those things. So if you make your goals, whether they are personal or professional, with regards to these 5 characteristics, you will see you would be able to accomplish more, you will be more successful at what you're setting out for, and you will also have a sense of satisfaction, because we say that, like in the to-do list, similar to your goals also, every fulfilled activity or goal is self-reinforcing. Every time we do something nice, we feel good enough to do it the next time as well, right? So the self-reinforcement or which comes by accomplishing what we are setting out for can also be very, very rewarding. So, and we all are scientists here, we can always put this to test. It's a hypothesis testing. What works for you, you retain that. What doesn't work for you, you can always omit it out. These are practices which are largely found to be significantly helpful to people. You don't have to follow each one of them, but whatever resonates with you, the idea is that you get onto the journey of self-management. Not necessarily all of them. You tweak it the way you wish to, but get on with it is something that we need to be careful about. So specific, measurable, this is something for everything that you are trying to do, SMART goals, right? Then the last one in action-oriented approach is conflict management. Be it personal relationships or professional relationships, often we have issues or a lot of stresses coming from when we are not able to handle conflicts coming off situations or with our interaction with people. So create a wheel, what we call as peace wheel, right? So you could just find out what works for you in managing conflict. So if you feel that being aggressive works for you, I'm not sure how, but if it works for you, try and do it. And if it brings you peace and it brings a peaceful solution. But these are some of the activities which have been found to be significantly helpful to other people in managing conflict. So something like from walking away or ignoring to expressing that in this particular situation, this is how you're feeling, and that is why you wish to put across this perspective. So use I feel and whatever that you want to express. Deep breathing has been found to be significantly helpful in bringing down your stress levels, bringing you on a state of calm, where you can assess the situation better, where you can, put your message across in a more efficient manner without being overwhelmed either way. If certain situation you feel the way to end this conflict is by apologizing, by listening to what the other person is saying, actually listening, not hearing, but trying to other person's perspective, staying calmer, right? You could imagine when two people are fighting, right? If there's a fight, right, and another person is an aggressor, he or she is yelling at the top of his pitch, and the other person doesn't participate in that yelling match, he's just quiet or she's just quiet. How long do you think that conflict would last? It cannot flare up. It takes two to tango. So if you stay calm in a situation, that is also one way of managing a conflict. You could also come up with what can be done to deal with it. So from a more, troubleshoot, find suggestions, find solutions there, and or you just can physically ask them to not go ahead with the way they are approaching this particular problem and walk away and not participate in it. So these are ways which have been found to be helpful, but you all can devise one own set of peace wheel. Now, the idea is to create a peace wheel. You spin and say, is situation me what I'm going to do, right? So you could have, like, I'll start listening to music, I'll go for a walk, I will say, let's talk about it tomorrow, whatever works for you. The idea is what brings you peace, which way you are able to manage the conflict. You need to learn it on a priority basis. How you do it can be customized in accordance to the kind of person you are, but to have a toolkit in your arsenal where you deal with managing conflicts is important. Now, the second one is whereby we're talking about a little hardcore psychological concept of attributional retraining. So we'll be looking at ABC technique, which with an addition of D&E, and how positive thinking is important and how can you practice it. Now, first thing that we need to do in attributional retraining is retrain your mind, right? As we did in stress appraisal, our response to a situation is not there's a stimulus, there's a response. It is multi-layered. So what happens is that whenever there is any kind of event, right, or A stands for activating event or adversity, it is a precipitating event, it could be a stimulus, but for the sake of the model, we're taking it as adversity or activating event. It leads to a particular kind of a emotional consequence. You know, something bad happened, you felt a certain way. Now, this response or consequence of the situation is mediated by the kind of belief system you have about this event, right? So, for example, you have seen that, but a very famous drawing, which is quite often used for a lot of soft skill training programs, where 5 blind men are are asked to touch an elephant and tell what is it, right? So each blind person, whatever part of the elephant they are holding and whatever they know from their previous knowledge, on the basis of that they come about at that the leg of the elephant could be like a trunk of a tree, the tail could be seen as a rope, and so on and so forth. So we only interpret things of those things which we are able to understand in a certain way. What we don't see, what we can't make sense of. So if I have never eaten, let's say if I've never eaten lemon, any sour thing, I would not know that what a sour thing would be. So I would not look at lemon and say, oh, it's sour, because I don't know it is sour. So any adversity would be mediated by what my experiences, what my beliefs are about that situation. And as a result, it would lead to a consequence or an emotional response. So what you have not experienced, what you're not aware of, will not influence your emotional responses. So when we talk about changing the way you respond, we are targeting the wrong thing. We have to change our belief system. And once we change this, our responses automatically would change, right? So how do you change the belief system? It is by practicing, because how you're feeling, it is not a good place to be. So how do you change how you're feeling, right? So you're trying to change the emotional state, but actually you are questioning the belief states. So what do you do? The first thing you do is dispute. Why am I feeling this way? Now, for example, let's say you have in one of your projects or in one of your meetings, some of your colleagues did not behave the way you expected them to, or your friends kind of did not stand by you the way you expected them to, right? Now, if you can't think of that, if this is not a thought which has ever come to your mind with regards to these people, that they would probably backstab me, that situation would not come in your head, right? So you would only think of possible consequences which are already in your thought repository. So you may think, probably I did this to him, so that's why he or she is doing this to me. Probably because he or she was going through a bad phase. Whatever you think is the reason for why they did will decide whether you will feel good or bad. So if you're feeling bad, or if you're feeling distressed, or if you're feeling saddened, or if you're feeling anxious, angry, any of the negative emotions, then find ways to dispute what you're feeling, right? Why do you think this is happening, right? So why do you think that he will or she will backstab you? Why do you think people will not cooperate with you? What are the proofs you have? So when you logically question your own beliefs, because our beliefs are not always logical, are not always based on relevant proofs or necessary facts, right? So when we question those beliefs, we would be able to understand that we are only responding to it, but there's no element of truth to it. So you can distance yourself from a situation. Okay, Abhi, I'm feeling too overwhelmed by it. Abhi, I'm feeling too agitated. I'm not in a position to process this information properly. Let me come back and address it, right? So that is the distancing part of it. Second is distract yourself, that, put your mind elsewhere, because right now it's like troubled waters. You're not able to see what lies beneath. So there's no point addressing what lies beneath. I'll come back to it later. So you distract yourself with something which, takes your mind off the situation. And the third, which is a very most potent way, is dispute. Find parallel arguments against what you're thinking. And most of the times you will find that you have no reasons to base those extreme opinions on. Why am I thinking like that? You have no reasons for it except I feel like that, right? So disputation actually is like a fact check, right? Why do you think it's happening? What do you think is the reason it's happening? What proof do you have that this is the reason it's happening? And the more you go into those disputing part of it, you will realize that those beliefs that you probably are holding are irrational, and you're able to challenge it. And as a result, when you're able to dispute these irrational beliefs, you would be able to change this the impact of this emotional consequence. And if you were feeling at the time of adversity, let's say, if you were feeling on a scale of 1 to 10, 3, whereas 1 is very bad, and at the end of these exercises of using any of these 3, disputation, distancing, or distraction, you will see you're able to bring yourself to a 6 or 7. And as often as you practice, you will be able to retrain your brain. And now this is something which would come from practice. You may do it to one situation, you may do it to another situation, and soon you would automatically be able to, it will be a reflex response that before you jump to the most extreme conclusion, you will be participating in these exercises in your head and not allowing yourself to feel the consequences of an irrational belief in the first place. So all these techniques work at both the levels, at the preventive part also, and at the curative part as well, for dealing with the situation now and here and preparing yourself to not get into a situation in the future. It works in both the scenarios. Now, with regards to positive thinking, as a part of our survival, that need of survival, as part of the way we are genetically wired, we are bound to think in terms of how to protect ourselves. So we would be probably seeing more situations as negative than they are, because we are in the constant mode of survival. So again, as I said, the threats are not the same. It is not actually about survival, but our responses have kind of remained intrinsic to our basic survival need. So how do you bring a shift from your negative thinking to positive thinking? By not talking about them, by dismissing them, you cannot wish them away. But if you could probably take a screenshot of it, or I could share it with the resource person, with the organizers, for every such thing, or you could just, it's a simple table for any negative thought you have, right? Any negative thought. If I may take Dr. Smita's example, that I, despite my PhD in biological sciences, I do not have a PhD. I do not have a future, right? What is the rational thought behind this, right? Why do you think you do not have a job right now? Write down everything you can in terms of why it is happening. Is it you? Is it the places that you're applying for? Is it you're trying at the wrong place? It will give you a lot of clarity about why you were thinking in the first place the wrong thing. Right? So when you look at the rational aspect of it, you realize that it's not me who is at fault, but probably there is something incorrect about my approach to, this is just an example because you spoke about it. There is something which I need to change in terms of what I have been doing thus far. Maybe I should try, instead of this university or this college, I should probably try that, because this place doesn't have scope for me, or they do not have, nobody's retiring, no jobs are opening up here. So I would have to go beyond my comfort zone and start applying elsewhere if I want to be employed, right? And then you replace it with what I need to think of, that all these things have proven that my thought about that I'm not good enough is incorrect. So what I want for myself, right? I'm good enough. I'm going to apply in XYZ. I'm going to speak to these people who are working and asking them for things. In the meanwhile, I'll pick up a job which will help me gain experience. I'll become a part of a research team and, become a PI, write projects. I will meaningfully engage myself in those activities which would keep me gainfully engaged and at the same time will help me gain experience. And whenever an opportunity comes, I will try and apply there. And with this experience that I have gained so far, my chances of getting a job would be higher. From just questioning, challenging your negative mindset, you can absolutely bring a paradigm shift to your thinking. So positive thinking is another way through which you can flip the stressor, on its head and change the way you look at situation. And the last one are acceptance oriented, right? Acceptance oriented is what we mean by the things which we cannot change, right? Things which we cannot, we have no control over. However, things which we can change with regards to ourselves and bring in a change in ourselves, which would have an impact on how we respond to situations, is what acceptance oriented speeches speak about. Okay, not that. So under this, we'll be looking at two things. One is your physical relaxation, and the second is lifestyle changes. Now, when I speak about this thing, invest in rest, I'm not speaking about your naps during the day, or you taking watching movie, or you taking part into any kind of recreational activities or some leisure activity. I'm speaking about rest in general, rest of all your sensory organs, right? So, but there are certain tested psychological practices which have been found to bring in some immediate symptomatic relief, right? A deep sense of relaxation. And as we spoke of that once, when the waters are, muddy, you can't see beneath, right? So relaxation is one way of bringing all your senses to a level of calm where you're able to see what works for you, right? So these are three techniques which are used for physical relaxation. One is called as PMRT, that's progressive muscle relaxation therapy. Second is deep breathing, and third is visual imagery. And these are all portable ones. Portable ones, matlab, you could do it anywhere, but you can do it right now if you're stressed. But obviously, right after my session, not now, but you could just do it wherever you are. You could be traveling, you could be in a metro, you could be in a bus. Of course, when you're driving yourself, not then necessarily, but you're in office, you're in park, you're just before you're going off to sleep, any of these places. So it's a portable thing. Once you learn how to do it, it can bring you, it's like opening up your bag and taking out, it's like popping a pill which brings you relief. So whenever you're feeling stressed, when you learn to practice either of these things, you could just do it and bring yourself relief from the physical stress, right? So there are different kinds of deep breathing techniques which are available. Since I'm no expert in yoga and any of these breathing techniques, but these are the ones which most of us have been, we may have heard it from different sources, which has been found to be extremely beneficial. The idea is to take deeper breaths, because that's how the brain sends a message that there's nothing to be concerned. Because one of the first symptoms we spoke about in the flight fight mode was when you have palpitations, you have rapid heartbeat, and you have shallow breaths. So that's the signal which brain gets that there's a danger and it has to get into a fight flight mode. So your sympathetic nervous system gets activated. So when you're breathing deeply, when you're breathing calmly, when you're taking more deeper breaths, the brain gets a signal that the parasympathetic nervous system needs to be activated because there is no apparent stress. So even when you are dealing with a stressor, when you start to breathe deeply, you can change the flight and fight response to rest and restore response. So the types of deep breathings are belly breathing. You could do to a count also. There is a box breathing which says inhale to the count of 4, hold the breath to the count of 4, then exhale to the count of 4. Then there is another 4 to inhale to the count of 4, hold to the count of 16, exhale to 8. So depending upon where you're learning it from, I would suggest to learn it from a more trusted resource. But any which way you are able to breathe consciously, breathe deeply, and visualize while while breathing, any of these techniques which you practice will bring you a lot of instant relief. It's going to from that situation, it's going to bring you instant relief, And if you practice it regularly, this I can guarantee that you would have a delayed response to stress or a more effective response to stress. So if you would get immediately worked up because a situation did work you up in the past. So if you practice deep breathing, mindful breathing, PMRT and visual imagery, you will see that you may not get worked up after you have mastered these arts. You will be in a better position to make sense of what the situation demands and act accordingly. So it works like that. Progressive muscle relaxation therapy basically works in you feel the tension in the respective from your head to your toe. You build up tension in your body and then consciously relax. So it kind of equates to that when we are feeling stress, as a reflex, our jaws are clenched, our brows are furrowed, our eyes are squinted, we probably fist our hands, and our shoulders are hunched up, and we're feeling we're carrying a lot of tension on the upper part of your body. Your feet may be in a more contorted position, your legs may be too tightly joined together. So all these places we're already feeling stress. So getting aware of the feeling, and this all we are doing at a subconscious level. We are not necessarily looking at like this because we are trying to do it. It's a natural response when we're trying to make sense of a more tricky situation. So when we start to experience that this is how tension seems like, and then we learn to consciously relax it, then we notice how relaxation feels. And as a result, whenever you start to feel any of your body part feeling in that hunched up position, or feeling that bunched, or feeling that tight and contorted, you could instantly bring a sense of relief, and you will feel the difference in the extremes, like the way you were feeling when the muscles were tense and how you're feeling relaxed. And this is how you could bring relaxation to every single part of your body. And as the word suggests, progressive. So you move from one part of your body to the next. You start with your legs and you go towards your head. So this is one of the techniques. Then visual imagery is basically a mini mental vacation, right? So you could, in a longer session where we would have just spoken about this, we could have done probably asked each, in a physical session, I would say, we do that we ask participants to follow our instructions and feel the change that comes about in the instructions. So you basically can think of a place which brings you a lot of happiness, which is serene for you, which brings you calmness. And we give you instructions to bring yourself to a level of deep state of calm, and then transport yourself to that. So this picture is a reflection of taking you to a place which is extremely relaxing, calming, something that you enjoy, and all your five senses are engaged. So when we give the instructions, we say you could taste the water, which is very sweet. You could feel the warm sunshine. You could feel the cool air, depending on the season. We change the scenario, but all your senses are engaged. So when all your senses are engaged, it's a more wholesome experience. And it's a 5-minute thing. You can do anywhere, and it instantly brings you a lot of calm. So these are the steps which initial ones. Again, if you require, I'll leave a copy of one such technique which you can practice, a handout kind of a thing. Find a quiet place, choose your setting, whatever you like: beaches, you like mountains, you like open areas, you like watching a movie, whatever is your go-to place for feeling nice and calm and quiet, right? Use all your senses to immerse yourself in the experience and try and include as much details as possible. So when you say feel the sunshine, you could feel the grass under your feet, you can smell roses from a distance, you could hear water, river flowing in a distance, you could hear sun waves, sea waves, you could feel sun rays, you could hear children playing at a distance. Whatever is your thing, just engage all your senses. And as you engage all your senses, you will get more concentrated towards your visual that you're trying to create. And then be in that moment, enjoy those senses, start to feel, and you will actually feel that you've transported yourself in that position. And when you come out of that thing, you can actually do how you were feeling at the beginning of it and how you're feeling thereafter, and you will see a substantiative shift in your sense of agitation or restlessness and irritability, they all would have markedly come down. Yeah, and this is something, as I said, that you need to be making sure that you use all your senses. That's when it works the best, right? Then lifestyle changes. This I've taken from part of my MPhil work, that Ayurveda has recognized the role stress plays in various kinds of disorders, from your physical to your emotional, all disorders. Stress tends to have a big role to play in it. And it says that in Charak Samhita, it's mentioned that stress is, which can take away your ojakasya, which is your immunity. So it can lead to loss of immunity if stress is sustained for a longer period of time. And in Hindi, there is another statement, another saying which says, Chinta chita saman hai. Like, so loosely it could be translated into stress or worrying is equivalent to a funeral pyre, right? So it is kind of affecting you adversely, right? It will take you towards the end in not such a good manner, right? And that's why it is important for us to be mindful of what changes we need to bring about so that we could lead a more fulfilling, stress controlled life. So Ayurveda speaks about 4 things, out of which 3 I'm mentioning here. First is food, right? So they say, Jaisa an, vaisa man. You are what you eat, right? So when we are making more poor nutritional choices, it is going to have an impact on our emotional, physical well-being as well. So what we eat needs to be looked into and rectified. Second, the thoughts, right? The retraining of mind. The same thought can be changed, turn on its head and put differently. So what kind of, even what you're consuming in terms of thoughts, it doesn't have to be your own indigenous thoughts, but the kind of news that we have, like for example, during the pandemic, all of us psychologists across India, we had created a forum whereby we are helping people who are looking for psychological counseling free of cost on telephonic counseling. And one of the things we would suggest to people who are worried about catching the infection or the impact of pandemic on them, we said, cut down on your news consumption about the pandemic, because news is newsworthy only when it's negative. Good news, unfortunately, doesn't make for good news. So what kind of news you're consuming? If your day starts with newspaper, which is not very full of good things, if you are meeting people who are energy drainers, if you are watching serials or movies which are showing a lot of violence, and I'm not saying that you turn a blind eye to the truth of life at times, or to the travesty of times, but if you're only consuming that kind of content, your mindset would also shift, right? So you have to diversify. Okay, you wish to know what is happening around the world, good and bad. That could be one of the portions of what you take from the news. But you also watch something which is humorous, something which is relaxing, something which speaks about the well-being of the world, something maybe spirituality if you're not a religious person, or if you are a religious person, then some religious texts. Diversify and try and take things which are more positive, right? Because in any case, no matter how much we engage in these political debates and discussions and the world affairs, there is, unless you're in a position to bring about a change, it's just talk, right? But it can sap you, right? So be more mindful of what kind of thoughts are you letting in, because that will also have an impact on your physical and emotional well-being. And the last one, the third one is Vihar. Vihar is recreational activities. What do you do for leisure, right? So, which is part of, if they say all play and all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, right? So when you're consuming these things and you're not actually expending your energy, physical energy, or out, you are accumulating a lot of toxins in your body, right? Your body is meant to be moving, and the kind of frame of mind that you have that is how your body is going to be, right? So the laws of nature, which some of the practitioners and this naturalist practice, they say body has an inherent wisdom to deal with whatever crisis it may go through, right? And a lot of it, there are researches, though not very substantiative, but there are researches which says, you have an entire set of self-help books like Louise Hay's You Can Heal Your Body, You Can Heal Your Mind, and I'm forgetting the name of the author, but The Laws of Attraction book, The Secret, right? So the affirmations that you make, the kind of things that you think can also have an impact on your body. And this has been studied under the realms of positive psychology, where we have found that people who tend to have a more optimistic, hopeful outlook, they have better chances of survival from a chronic illness. Also, they are found to be more physically healthy. They're found to be engaging in more health promoting behaviors, and they tend to have a more positive outlook towards life, right? So all these three things have to come together. They have to make a part of a synergy, which is a lifetime thing, which is a lifestyle thing. It is not something you would do whenever you face a stressor, but this is something you have to practice on a daily basis. Be mindful of what you're consuming in terms of food, in terms of thoughts, and what are you doing to keep your, what gives you energy, what brings you joy, what gives you a sense of relaxation. So life is not only about running after goals and running after financial gains, right? You have to find ways where you can let your hair down, enjoy the smaller joys of life as well. All these three things need to be added together as part of your daily routine, but consciously you have to. And in this case, sleep is something which has taken a toll during the pandemic. And sleep and nutrition are the two things we compromise the most when we are under stress. And the Dalai Lama says sleep is the best meditation. And especially during the pandemic, there is a concept which has been studied now and which has resurfaced, which is called as revenge bedtime. That people who feel that they have worked very hard through the day, they reward themselves by doing things which bring them joy, by compromising on their hours of sleep. So you have seen the growth of OTT platforms in the last 1.5 years, and the amount of time people are spending on these platforms, saying Netflixing is becoming, Googling has become a verb, Netflixing, Amazon, and the number of channels which have come. So a lot of people have started to reward themselves for all the hard work by staying up till late at night. And unfortunately, it is a double whammy. You've worked hard through the day and you're not allowing your body to relax. Melatonin is something released at night when the body is going to be in the rest and restorative mode. And if you stay up at that point of time and consuming content which makes you more stressed or which stimulates you, then obviously you're not allowing your body to rest at all. So the wear and tear continues to happen. So being very mindful of the quality of sleep that we have, making sure that we clock in enough hours, we are well rested, is one of the things which is very important for stress management. Tired minds don't plan well. Sleep was planned later. Those of you who compromise on their sleep in order for achieving things which you think are more important, it's about time we reprioritize. So as I said in the beginning, invest in rest. It is a part of a philosophy by a group which works on laws of nature, the Health Awareness Center. They say that when you invest in rest, it has to be physical, mental, digestive, sensory, emotional, creative, and spiritual rest. Rest is not the one that we generally identify as clocking in enough hours or taking naps, but we have to also take a sensory break also. Keep away your devices, keep away everything that stimulates your senses, right? Stay away from people who drain you, right? Do things which brings you happiness, like mandala, paint, sing, dance, gardening, cooking, whatever that works for you. Some kind of spiritual source of wisdom, help, calm, whatever that you're looking for should come from there. Digestive, if you've been eating, there is a concept of fasting in India that almost all religions practiced here do speak about the significance of fasting, right? So giving your body a break, body, soul, and mind a break is very important, and then you can recharge your batteries better. Lastly, these are the references that I have taken. If anybody is interested, I can pass them on. The studies which have been done, which speaks about the impact of various things on in terms of bodily stress, in terms of physical stress, emotional stress, and so on and so forth. And lastly, as we did in case of stress appraisal, I want to reaffirm the part that it's not it is our reaction to adversity and not the adversity that determines how our life story will shape. So there was this story which goes when Akbar asked people, tell me a statement which is both hopeful and hopeless at the same time. So Birbal says, this too shall pass, right? So this too shall pass, if you say to somebody who's going through a low phase,